Crushing on the Billionaire. Written by Liwen YHO. Chapter 1. Devon. If there was one thing Devon Brooks feared most, it was being alone. As the youngest of three, he'd hardly had a moment of peace to himself as a kid, which was precisely how he liked it. Even now at age 30, he worked with his brother Gabriel at the biotech company they started together and lived next door to his sister Laureen. As a new billionaire, thanks to a generous inheritance from their father, his Los Altos Hills mansion was fully staffed. In effect, he never had a chance to be by himself. Which made this vacation in Hawaii a dreadful one for him. He'd arrived a few days ago, fully intending to spend the day snorkeling and hiking with Gabe and Laureen, not knowing they'd soon be caught up in new relationships. Gabe had flown back to Silicon Valley to be with his new girlfriend Serafina, while Laureen was out sightseeing with her new boyfriend Noah. That left Devon sitting poolside at a golf and beach club, his only companions a glass of champagne and a book. "Hi, handsome," a feminine voice cooed near his ear. The woman it belonged to leaned over from the plush recliner next to his. "Whatcha reading?" Devon smiled politely. Even though he was in need of company, the last thing he wanted was a woman who was only interested in his money. He'd noticed the pretty blonde eyeing his Patek Philippe watch and diamond Cartier ring for the past 10 minutes since he'd sat down. He was surprised it took her this long to speak up. Looking over the rim of his designer shades, he replied, "Some info on the South Pacific Islands." "Oh. I'd love to go there someday," she gushed. "Maybe you could be my tour guide." She batted her long, fake lashes at him and reached over to run a hand along his forearm. "With muscles like these, you could be my bodyguard, too. I assume you have a lot of assets that need protecting," he asked. He raised his sunglasses back onto the bridge of his nose. "I could recommend someone to you. I'm afraid I don't get much of a workout as a handyman." Disgust flickered across the woman's face. She readily pulled her hand back from Devon's arm and wiped her hand on the towel beneath her body. "I think I'll be fine." With a swift turn of her head, she began talking to the man on her other side. Devon chuckled softly as he resumed reading. It always surprised him how much people, especially women, despised the professionals who kept their wires and pipes working. That was one reason he was glad he'd retired his toolbox 5 years ago. He'd been happy as a blue-collared worker who earned a decent living from good old-fashioned manual labor, but he was proud to be working in the corporate world now, helping to further cancer research. He was fortunate to be a jack-of-all-trades type of guy with interests in a variety of fields. Right now, though, his interest was solely invested in one thing: the gorgeous dark-haired woman walking toward a cabana on the other side of the pool. Her wide-brimmed hat hid her face, but there was something familiar about the way she walked. She glided along the pavement in high-heeled sandals that showed off a pair of long legs, moving with the grace of a dancer. Her cover-up revealed just enough of the gold bikini that hugged the delicate curves of her body. Devon squinted to focus on the image decorating her slender ankle. His mouth grew dry when he saw the tattoo inked in black of a single dandelion with several seeds flying above it. Could it be? The woman sat down on a plush recliner next to a female also in her early 30s. Now in the shade, she took off her hat and set it to the side. Her bubbly laughter filled the air, brightening the whole place more than the tropical sunshine on this summer day. As soon as Devon heard it, he knew without a doubt who she was. Kylie Martin. His old girlfriend. The only woman he had ever truly loved, if you could call a childhood crush love. Only a few days ago, his sister Laureen had mentioned bumping into his ex on the island of Oahu. Now, here she was, looking every bit as amazing as the last time he saw her a dozen years ago. Back at Eden Prep, Devon and his siblings had been the middle-class students attending an elite private school, thanks to some scholarships. It'd been a miracle that he had caught the attention of the most popular and wealthiest girl on campus. It had helped that he'd stood a head taller than the rest of the boys in their class and he'd driven a cool car, a Mitsubishi Eclipse, that he'd bought and fixed up with his own money. He had managed to impress Kylie for a year and a half, a lifetime in high school years, before she left him for the son of a millionaire. Devon released a heavy breath. That was all in the past. He may not have been rich enough for Kylie before, but he was now. He owned multiple properties worth hundreds of millions of dollars around the world. His garages housed a dozen supercars, including the Koenigsegg Trevita he'd flown in for this vacation. He could buy an island, for crying out loud. In fact, he was just reading up on one that he was looking to purchase. Not that he still wanted to win over Kylie Martin. He was long over her, wasn't he? He had almost convinced himself of this before she looked over the sparkling waters of the pool and spotted him. Their gazes locked, and Devon's body immediately heated. His heart raced as Kylie cocked her head, studying him. The shock on her face soon gave way to a surprised smile. She recognized him. In that instant, Devon knew he was a goner. Old memories of their time together surfaced in his mind, along with joy in his heart. Kylie had been so many of his firsts: first date, first girlfriend, first kiss. Being the hopeless romantic that he was, he'd always held a special place for her in his heart. Perhaps that's why he'd never found another woman to rival her. This chance meeting couldn't have come at a better time. With the palm tree swaying above and the roar of the ocean behind them, this was the perfect place for a second chance at love. Devon rose from his seat and grabbed 2 glasses of champagne from a server walking by. With a bright smile, he strode around the pool to Kylie's cabana. If things worked out the way he hoped, he wouldn't be spending the rest of this vacation alone.
Chapter 2. Kylie. Kylie Martin gripped the cushion of her recliner to keep herself upright. If her eyes weren't playing tricks on her, the last man she ever imagined, or desired, running into on the Big Island was walking toward her right now. She let out a soft gasp, her heart pounding with each one of his steps. Time had been good, oh so good to Devon Brooks. He'd been cute in high school, but he was now the very definition of smoking hot. His unbuttoned white linen shirt revealed a well-defined chest and taut abs that seemed to glisten in the sunlight. He seemed like a photoshopped image walking off the pages of GQ, but Devon was very much a real man. The tenderness and hope on his face made her stomach drop, and not in a good way. Kylie wished she could hide or become invisible. She'd be so ashamed if he knew the type of person she'd become. "Who is that hunk of a man?" Kylie's friend, Tabitha, drawled in a southern accent as she peered over the rim of her sunglasses. Her curly blonde hair swung around her shoulders as she leaned forward in her seat. She twisted her petite body to face Kylie, her jaw dropped. "Is he looking at you, Kai?" "I think he is. And he's walking this way. Whatever could he want with us?" Kylie bit her bottom lip as she flipped her long straight hair over her shoulder. She pulled her sheer cover-up over her body, trying in vain to conceal herself. So much for wanting to show off the bikini she'd splurged on for this trip. She also kissed goodbye to enjoying her one day off from work. There was no relaxing now, especially with the barrage of questions Tabitha was shooting her way. "We were classmates once upon a time," she said. "Are you sure you weren't more?" Tabitha asked. "Because the way he's looking at you sure says otherwise. We did date, but we were just kids. I haven't seen him since high school." Kylie shot Tabitha a pleading look. "He doesn't know about my family, and I'd like to keep it that way. Please." Tabitha's blue eyes widened. "Of course," she said. "Mum's the word. I won't say a thing about why we're here. We're just 2 girlfriends on vacation together." "Thanks," Kylie managed to reply as a rich baritone voice greeted them with a smooth hello. She glanced up and up some more until her gaze locked with a pair of familiar hazel eyes. "Devon? Fancy meeting you here. Lorene mentioned she ran into you the other day," he replied. "I was hoping our paths would cross as well. You can imagine my surprise when I saw you." He handed her a glass of champagne, then gave the other one to Tabitha. He flashed a friendly smile and introduced himself. "Hi, I'm Devon Brooks, an old friend of Kylie's." And you are? Tabitha offered her hand, which Devon promptly graced with a kiss. I'm Tabitha, but you can call me Tabby. Aren't you a gentleman, giving me your glass of champagne? It wouldn't be right to let a lovely woman go thirsty in this heat, he answered. You sure are sweet. It's a pleasure to meet you, Devon. She turned to Kylie with a raised brow. Aren't you going to give your old friend a hug? That's what we do in the South. Kylie tried to keep her cool, but her cheeks felt like they were on fire. You know I'm a California girl through and through, she replied with gritted teeth. Come on, Kai, he remarked. We ought to keep to tradition. Devon winked at her, causing the flurry of butterflies in her stomach to take wing. I suppose we should. She set her glass on a side table and stood up. Even with her heels on, she only came up to Devon's shoulders. He stepped forward and wrapped his muscular arms around her, not bothering to wait for her to initiate. It's so good to see you. You look amazing. Thanks. Kylie could hardly think, much less speak. Devon's embrace was so strong and warm, offering her a level of comfort she hadn't felt in a very long time. How could he be so gentle and kind to her after she'd dumped him in high school? A lump formed in her throat as she reflected on her regrets. He was too good for her then, and he was too good for her now. She took a deep breath to clear her thoughts, but ended up getting a whiff of Devon's spicy cologne. Oh, he smelled amazing. Her heart skipped a beat, confirming how easily she could fall for him again. If only the circumstances were different, but they weren't. Loosening her hold, she replied, You look great yourself. I can't believe how tall you've gotten. Did you end up playing basketball in college? He held her for another second before letting go. When he pulled back, he stood close with barely a foot between them. I did, but I messed up my knee sophomore year. It was the end of the road for me then. I'm sorry to hear that, she replied. I know how much you wanted to play professionally. He shrugged. It's all right. Life had other plans for me. I'm happy where I am. How about you? Let me guess, you're a dancer now, or maybe an artist? You were always so creative. Frowning, Kylie shook her head. She hated being reminded of how she'd had to give up on her dreams. Things didn't work out the way I'd hoped either. She also hated the pity she saw on Devon's face. She recognized that look all too well. It's fine, it just wasn't in the cards for me. Anyhow, I don't want to bore you with the details. I'm sure you came to this beautiful place to escape reality. She pasted a smile on her face and injected some enthusiasm into her next words. Thank you for the champagne and for stopping by to say hi. It was nice to see you again after all these years. Before Devon could reply, Tabitha jumped off her recliner, taking her beach towel with her. You know what, I'm going to do some sunbathing over there, she pointed to the other end of the pool, you know, in the sun, since that's what sunbathing entails, she added with chagrin. You go ahead and take my seat, Devon. Stay as long as you like. Tabby. Kylie softened her next words when she realized how loudly she was talking. Are you sure you don't want to stay in the shade? You burn so easily. If Tabitha didn't pick up on her insistent tone, she would surely notice her pleading eyes. Or not. Kylie watched her friend wave goodbye and saunter away with a mischievous grin. Oh, she was going to give her an earful later. But now, she had a more pressing problem to deal with. Devon studied her with a curious yet amused expression. He glanced at the empty seat beside her and remarked, If you'd prefer to be alone, I understand. But I was hoping for some company. My siblings abandoned me for their significant others, so I've been spending my time in paradise all alone. You know how much I hate being by myself, he added with an exaggerated pout. Kylie couldn't help but smile. Devon had always been a social butterfly back in high school. His confidence and likability made him stand out in a crowd and captured her, as well as their female classmates, attention. It seemed times hadn't changed. She noticed several women around them glancing his way. But crazily enough, Devon only had eyes for her. She'd be a fool to tell him no. She also had to admit a part of her wanted to reconnect with him, to know how he was doing. As her first boyfriend, Devon had always held a special place in her heart. Taking a deep breath, she nodded. Sure, have a seat. His full lips curved into a wide grin, revealing a boyish side. He quickly plopped down on the recliner beside her, lacing his hands behind his head. Great. So, tell me all about what you've been up to since graduation. Kylie cringed. This was what she'd been afraid of. What would Devon think of her now if he knew her family had lost all their money and she'd only been able to come on this trip because of her job?
Chapter 3. Devon. Talking with Kylie made Devon feel like a teenager again. He felt happy and light, without a care in the world. He couldn't remember the last time he'd been this attracted to a woman, physically and emotionally. There was a level of comfort he had with Kylie that made being near her feel like home. He wondered though if she felt the same. She hadn't touched her glass of champagne since setting it down, and now her cheeks were bright red. Devon gave her a reassuring smile. Sorry to put you on the spot like that, he stated. I can go first. Sure, she replied with a relieved smile. I'd like to hear what you've been up to. It looks like you're doing well for yourself. I am, he replied. We all are, in fact. He sat up on his recliner and turned to face her. The interested look on her face encouraged him to speak, causing his words to flow like the waterfall overlooking the pool. You know how I always liked to tinker with things when I was a kid. I took those skills, borrowed some money from my parents, and started my own business right out of college. I contracted with a couple of apartment complexes and got some steady work. It wasn't much in terms of pay, but I enjoyed it. That's great, Devon. You always were good with your hands. Her gaze wandered to his long fingers and traveled up the length of his arm, finally resting on his chest. She blinked quickly, her cheeks flushing, before lifting her eyes. So you're a small business owner, she stated. That must keep you busy. Devon worked hard to keep from smiling. He didn't mind Kylie checking him out. He more than welcomed any signs of interest on her part. I actually stopped my handyman business about 5 years ago. Long story short, Gabe and I were able to start our own company with our father's help. We focus on cancer research, he explained. Not me, exactly. I meet with investors and act as the face of the company. All the on-camera stuff Gabe doesn't want to deal with I handle. Kylie's eyes widened. That's amazing, she exclaimed. You started a company? Your family must be doing really well. He couldn't help puffing out his chest a little. After being labeled one of the poor kids at Eton Prep, it felt good to finally measure up to them. Our father, God rest his soul, made sure we were well provided for when he passed away. We started Neogene in his honor. I'm so sorry about your father, she remarked. I had no idea. Thanks, I appreciate it. He was a tough man to please, but he did teach us how to work hard and make a living. We learned not to take anything for granted, that's for sure. He noticed her serious expression and tried to lighten his tone. I didn't mean to put a damper on the mood. My family and I are all in a better place now. Our mother remarried a year ago to someone she met at a charity fundraiser. Our stepfather truly loves her, and not just for her money. Both Gabe and I were relieved about that. It can be hard to know whether someone likes you or for your bank account. He cocked his head and smirked. Well, I'm sure you know what that's like. Her cheeks reddened again. Yes, she replied. I hate when that happens. I always did appreciate how you took a chance on me back in high school, he remarked, even though our family didn't have much. I think you like me for me. Or was it because of my car, he added with a playful grin. She cracked a smile. You had a nice car, Devon, but that's not why I liked you. It wasn't even your face, as cute as it was. So you thought I was cute? He asked. She rolled her eyes. You know I did. But it was more than that. It was your personality, how warm and genuine you were. You were like a breath of fresh air compared to the other kids. She paused and took a deep breath. I really wish I hadn't taken you for granted. I'm so sorry for the way things ended between us. Her voice faltered. Can we chalk it up to stupidity and peer pressure on my part? My teenage self should have known better, but she didn't. I'm sorry, Devon. He reached out and covered her hand with his, giving it a gentle squeeze. Hey, don't sweat it, he replied. Youth is the best time to be foolish. It gives us the rest of our lives to make up for the things we did that we regret. Gratitude shone in her deep brown eyes, making them twinkle. You are wise beyond your years, Dev. Thank you. You were always a true friend. Devon found himself getting lost in Kylie's eyes like he used to when they were kids. His siblings would likely say he was crazy for letting the past go so easily, but there was no way he could stay upset with her. He'd always seen beyond her facade and known there was more to her than her perfect clothes, hair, and makeup. She'd confided in him about her dad's gambling addiction, and had cried on his shoulders more than once. He understood she'd given into her insecurities when she chose a rich kid over him. Money had been her as well as their classmates' crutch, their main source of security. He hadn't been able to offer much to her then, but he could more than provide for her now. With his hand still on hers, he inched forward until their knees touched. The warmth from her bare skin ignited a spark that heated his whole body. He brought her hand to his lips and placed a kiss along her knuckle. Speaking of making up for the past, I can't help but feel this was meant to be, us meeting here like this. I'd love to take you out for a night on the town. For old time's sake. What do you say? Kylie quickly pulled her hand out of his grasp. That sounds nice, but I shouldn't. I have. She bit her lower lip. Whatever excuse she was searching for didn't seem to come. Sorry. Maybe he had read the situation wrong. Are you seeing someone? He asked. I thought you were here with a girlfriend. I shouldn't have assumed you were single. No, she cut in, there's no boyfriend. I'm not looking for a relationship, if that's what you're interested in. Not that I'm assuming you are. He suppressed the grin threatening to overtake his lips. He'd never seen Kylie flustered like this before. She'd always been poised and in control when they were younger, reminiscent of a queen bee. Perhaps time and life had grounded her. Either way, he liked this new side to her, even if she was rejecting his offer for a date. So be it. He would rather spend time with her as a friend than not see her at all. I'd like to rekindle our friendship, he stated. Would that be okay with you? Kylie's posture relaxed considerably. She nodded and simply said, okay. That one word started the gears in Devon's head spinning. He couldn't wait to take her on an adventure she'd never forget. He vowed to wow Kylie so much that by the end of the evening, she would have no choice but to rescind her decision to just be friends.
Chapter 4. Kylie. Kylie turned around in front of the full-length mirror, catching a glimpse of her outfit from every angle. The bright yellow cotton poplin dress hugged her torso and flared out at the waist to show off her calves under a full skirt. With a wistful smile, she reminisced about the muscle tone she'd lost in her legs since she stopped dancing. Now at age 30, she was too old to dance but still young enough to chase after kids. Being a nanny, however, wasn't so much of a physical workout as it was a mental and emotional one. The girls in her care needed constant attention, and their mother demanded perfection. Kylie often wondered how long she'd last in this job. A good layer of makeup hid the dark circles under her eyes, concealing how tired she really was. How tired she'd been the last decade trying to make ends meet. It wasn't just herself she was supporting, she paid for her mother's rent and food as well. Ever since her father had squandered their life savings away, she'd become the breadwinner. Working as a nanny for one of the wealthiest families in the Bay Area was a grueling job, but it did pay the bills. You look so good, girl. Tabitha squealed behind her. I bet you'll have Devon eating out of your hand by the end of the night. Kylie rolled her eyes at her friend who sat on one of the beds in the guest house where the two of them were staying. The family Tabitha nannied for had also come along on this trip, as the children were all classmates at the same school. Kylie was thankful for Tabitha's company and for lending her a dress for this evening. "It's all thanks to you," she stated. "I didn't bring anything suitable for an evening out. I didn't think I'd be going on a date, not that this is a date," she quickly corrected herself. "It is so a date," Tabitha exclaimed. "With a handsome and rich man, no less." Sighing, Tabitha shot Kylie a longing glance. "Say you'll remember me when you marry up. You'll still come and visit me in the poorhouse, won't you?" Kylie smirked. "You're too much, Tabs. I think you missed your calling as an actress." Kylie slid her feet into a pair of Tabitha's heels and grabbed her purse off the bed. "I'm not marrying anyone, much less Devon Brooks. We're totally different people now. I'm sure he wouldn't give me the time of day in the real world." She made air quotes with her fingers. "He's just lonely here in Hawaii. There's something about this place that makes you want to do romantic things. Whatever the reason is, you're the one going out tonight, not me. I'm both jealous and happy for you." Tabitha stepped forward to give Kylie a quick hug. "This is just the break you need before going back to work tomorrow. I have a feeling we're going to have our hands full with the kiddos during the charity golf event. Those things go on forever." She drawled out the last two syllables a few extra beats. "You'd think they were playing 88 holes, not 18. Kylie laughed at Tabitha's cross-eyed expression. The tension in her shoulders and back fell away for a moment. She didn't realize how much stress her body had been taking lately. Her mom's recent health problems were taking a toll on her, too. She should be back home seeing to her care, not a time zone away. But the only reason she was here in Hawaii was to make money to pay for rent. Just a few more days and she would be able to go home to the Bay Area. But first, she had an evening to get through with her ex-boyfriend. Thinking of Devon made goosebumps rise along her arms. He hadn't changed much at all since they were teenagers. If anything, he was more mature and charming, not to mention, well off, which put him way out of her league. Honestly, a part of her had only agreed to see him tonight out of guilt. She'd treated him so badly as a kid that she wanted more than anything to make him happy. And if saying yes to an evening out made him smile, she'd go along with his plan. There was also a big part of her that longed to see him again. What woman wouldn't jump at the chance to spend time with a man who looked at her the way Devon did? If only for one night, she'd pretend to be someone she wasn't. She just had to make it back in time to get a good night's sleep and be up bright and early tomorrow morning for real life. "I wish I could bring you with me, Tabby. You deserve a night out, too." "Hey, don't worry about me," she replied. "I'm going to catch up on some TV and run a hot bath for myself, one without bubbles and squeaky toys." Tabitha paused to chuckle. "Actually, I'm going to keep the bubbles. I love popping them. But you should run along now and enjoy yourself." "Thanks, Tabs. I'll have enough fun for the both of us," Kylie remarked. "You do that. Sneak a little champagne for me, too," she added with a mischievous grin. Kylie balked. "You know that's against our contract. It's your day off. The alcohol will be out of your system by morning." She shook her head in chagrin. The last thing Kylie wanted to do was jeopardize her job. There was to be no drinking, even on their day off. That's why she hadn't taken a sip of the champagne Devon had offered her earlier today, as much as she wanted to. She hoped she'd be able to stick to her guns this evening as well. "Live a little," Tabitha piped up as if she could read Kylie's thoughts. She gave her a gentle push out the door, propelling her toward whatever the evening entailed. "Text me if you're going to be late, so I know not to wait up for you." "Don't worry," she replied. "I'll be home well before midnight." Kylie waved goodbye and set down the driveway toward her rental car. With butterflies in her stomach, she drove the minivan onto Ahukai Street heading north. When she had insisted on driving herself to their rendezvous location, Devon had texted her with directions to a nearby harbor. They had exchanged messages back and forth like two teenagers, complete with fun little emojis. She had looked forward to his texts, reading each one multiple times as if they were from a boy she had a crush on. That wasn't too far from the truth. Devon evoked emotions in her that she hadn't experienced in a long time. Hope and happiness seemed within reach again. She finally felt like she was living, not just surviving. For once, Kylie had something to look forward to. She assumed Devon was planning to take her on a sunset cruise. She hardly cared what they would be doing though. An evening out was just what she needed to relax and unwind. And who better to spend it with than an old friend? Because that's exactly who Devon was to her, nothing more. If she had to repeat that to herself all night to convince her heart, she would.
Chapter 5. Devon. Devon couldn't get over how beautiful Kylie looked when he met her in the parking lot of Keauhou Bay. She'd pulled into the cul-de-sac in a minivan of all things, but the vehicle only served to make her stand out even more as she exited it. The juxtaposition of her elegance next to the family car made him chuckle out loud. Did they run out of sports cars at the rental place? Kylie's cheeks flushed as she took his hand. "Oh yeah," she replied, "there was a mix-up with my reservation. But I have plenty of room for my luggage with this thing." She quickly shut the door and squeezed out a smile as she looked him over. "You look really good." "Thanks." He straightened his posture, feeling the confidence her compliment gave him coursing through his body. Lorene had given him some pointers on pairing a light blue shirt with dark gray trousers for tonight, for which he was grateful. Even though his sister had cautioned him against seeing Kylie, he hadn't listened to a word she said. Thank goodness he hadn't, because there was nowhere else he'd rather be but by her side. He lifted Kylie's hand to his mouth for a kiss before letting it rest in his grasp. "You look amazing." "Thank you." She glanced around the area, which consisted of a grassy park on their right with several picnic tables and a small stretch of black sand beach. Several families with small children were packing up their belongings, their laughter and conversations filling the air. Kylie glanced down at her high heels and pursed her lips. "I hope I'm dressed okay for the occasion. I wasn't sure what you had in mind when you said to meet you here." "You look perfect," he replied. "Come on, let's get going. The sun will be setting soon, and we don't want to miss it." He led her along the edge of the grassy field, past a sand volleyball court and a small shop renting out kayaks, stand-up paddleboards, and outrigger canoes. They headed onto an old boat ramp where his surprise waited for them on the crystal blue water. Kylie's jaw dropped when they reached the end of the ramp. Her reaction was worth every penny, $5.3 million to be exact, that he had spent on his new yacht. Actually, a floating spaceship was more like it. Its sleek and shiny dome-shaped exterior resembled the top half of a helmet. Large rectangular windows covered one side of the futuristic-looking vessel with a balcony on the other. What couldn't be viewed from the outside were the yacht's 4 levels, all connected by a spiral staircase. The lowest level, submerged at 9 feet below the surface, offered an underwater observation bubble with a 360-degree view. That was the spot Devon couldn't wait to take Kylie. Excitement rose within him as he thought about showing off his new purchase. His plan to impress her was already set in motion. "Where in the world did you find this?" She gave him a questioning glance, her deep brown eyes twinkling with awe. "I thought we'd be going out on a boat, but this is unlike anything I've seen before. I called in a favor with one of my father's old business associates," he stated. "This beauty is only one of a handful available in the world. If you think the exterior is cool, wait until you see the inside." He hopped onto the yacht, then reached out a hand to help her on board. A uniformed butler promptly greeted them and escorted them into the cabin. Several bright lights cast a warm glow on the luxurious space. 2 semicircular white leather sofas faced each other on one side of the room. A rectangular table with an impressive spread of food, from hors d'oeuvres to desserts, stood on the other side next to a wine bar. Devon walked over to the bar, picked up 2 glasses of champagne, and presented one to Kylie. He raised his glass and proposed a toast. To old friendships and new toys. Cheers. Kylie clinked her glass with his, hesitating before she took a drink. She released a soft sigh and took another sip. This is so good. I could get used to this. Devon chuckled at her obvious pleasure. You sound like you've never tasted champagne before. Oh, it's just been a while since I did, she answered. She turned away from him to glance out a window. The sun was beginning to set, painting streaks of orange and pink across the blue expanse of the sky. It's so beautiful. Somehow the sunsets here are more vibrant than the ones back home. He strode over and stood behind her. The sweet floral scent of her perfume filled his senses, intoxicating him more than the alcohol. He placed a hand on her shoulder and gazed out at the scenery. I'd have to agree. It may have something to do with who you watch a sunset with. He paused to laugh. That sounded less cheesy in my head. But I mean it, KY. Everything looks more beautiful with you in it. Kylie turned slightly and glanced up, craning her slender neck to meet his gaze. A mixture of amusement and discomfort colored her cheeks. Thanks for the compliment, Dev. You're a really sweet friend. He stepped back when he heard the emphasis she placed on the last word. Perhaps he was laying it on too strong. He considered taking a different approach. If friendship was what she wanted, and what he had agreed to, he'd stick to more casual conversation. So, I've talked a lot about myself, but I haven't heard much from you. How's your family doing? A pained expression crossed her face. My family? My mom's been struggling with back pain from a fall she took recently, but she's doing better. I'm sorry to hear that. How about your father? How is he? He's fine. Her curt tone surprised him. As a matter of fact, her whole demeanor, how she had suddenly crossed her arms tightly against her chest, threw him off. I didn't mean to pry. She gave him a tight smile. I'd prefer not to talk about him if you don't mind. Of course. So, what have you been up to lately? Not much, really, she began with a shrug. You know, shopping and traveling. The usual stuff people with money do. Devon nodded. It sounded like what his sister did with her time. Do you work? Not that you need to, of course. I keep myself busy. She lowered her lashes. I support some charities in my free time. His ears perked up at her last statement. That's wonderful. Have you heard of the one Katrina and Christopher Jones are putting on for cancer research tomorrow? It's a golf tournament. That's one of the reasons I'm here, to put a plug in for our company. Kylie's head whipped up as a coughing fit suddenly consumed her. She spewed out some of the champagne she'd been sipping, her face flushed red. Sorry, it went down the wrong tube. He grabbed a handful of napkins from the bar and handed them to her. It happens. Are you okay? Yeah, I'm fine. She cleared her throat as she dabbed at the front of her dress. Is there a restroom I can use? Of course. Devon took her glass and directed her down the hallway to their left. He watched Kylie walk away, more intrigued and curious about the woman she had become. An air of mystery surrounded her, making him wonder why she was being so tight-lipped. She didn't trust him like she once did. Why, he didn't understand, but he was determined to find out. He wasn't done wooing her yet.
Chapter 6. Kylie. As soon as Kylie stepped into the restroom, she knew she was in over her head. The opulence of the space decorated with dark cherry wood and white marble made her speechless. Light glinted off the crystal sink, making her blink twice as she stared at her reflection in it. She had a feeling the sink alone cost more than all her belongings combined. Devon wasn't just well off, he was loaded, with a capital L. Even with her affluent upbringing and those of their classmates, Kylie had never seen wealth like this before. The realization made her stomach turn. That, along with the fact that Devon would be attending the charity event that her employers were throwing tomorrow, started a wave of nausea to roll through her. Their worlds, as different as they were, would soon be colliding. There was no way she could enjoy the evening now. As much as she wanted to savor another drop of champagne, enjoy the sunset, and, most of all, be near Devon, she couldn't let herself live a life that wasn't hers. She was a working-class nanny, he was a rich entrepreneur. Ironically enough, she had looked down on people like herself once upon a time. The harsh reality of how the tables had turned coated her mouth like spoiled wine. She swallowed the bitterness, resolving to end the evening early. Kylie stepped out of the restroom and made her way back to Devon's side. As soon as she neared him, he turned and placed a hand on her arm. Heart aching, she stepped out of his reach. "I'm actually not feeling so great. Thank you for planning such a lovely evening, but I'm going to go." Concern creased his forehead as he studied her face. "Are you experiencing motion sickness? I can ask the captain to stop for a while." "Stop?" she asked. "We're already moving?" She suddenly noticed the change in scenery outside the windows. There was only blue water as far as the eye could see. "I had no idea we'd left the shore already." A smile curved Devon's lips. "It's one of the perks of this boat. It makes for a smooth ride." He paused and asked, "Would some ginger ale help?" "I'll get you a glass." He walked toward the bar before she could answer. "No, it's all right." The concern in his hazel eyes melted her insides. Kylie felt torn between wanting to stay and wanting to run away as far as possible. Though, in her case, she'd have to swim, seeing as how far they were from land. "I'll be fine. Maybe we can sit down for a while?" His eyes brightened as he came back to her side. "I have the best seat in the house for you. Follow me." Devon led her down the spiral staircase until they reached the bottom floor of the vessel. The circular room was enclosed completely with glass from top to bottom. 6 seats in the center, all facing outward, provided a perfect place to admire the view. Kylie's jaw dropped as she realized they were smack dab in the middle of the Pacific, surrounded by sea life. "Pretty cool, huh?" Devon grinned, seeming to enjoy her reaction. He took her hand and led her to one of the seats, before sitting down beside her. "I'm sure this will take your mind off your seasickness. This is amazing." Kylie leaned forward, watching fish of every color swim by. Bright hues of yellow and fluorescent blues and reds filled the window as fish darted in and out of the coral reefs. Several times whole schools of fish swam by in a blur of fins and tails. "It's like snorkeling but so much better," she remarked. "You don't have to worry about being tossed around by the waves." "Or drinking salt water," Devon joked as he sucked in his cheeks with his eyes open wide. "I always feel shriveled up after swimming in the ocean." Kylie couldn't help but giggle at his ridiculous expression. Devon had always been able to make her laugh with his silly antics. "You're all grown up, but you haven't changed much at all." "I take it that's a good thing?" he asked. She nodded. "Yes, it is." Their gazes locked, and her stomach dropped. The tenderness in his hazel eyes overwhelmed her. For a split second, she felt like a teenager again, about to be kissed for the first time. She remembered her and Devon's first kiss well, how he had moved in slowly, taking his time to savor the moment before their mouths met. Tilting his head to the side, he'd given her the most endearing smile, all the while holding her hand as if he never wanted to let her go. He wouldn't have either if he had any say in the matter. She was the one who'd closed the door on them, just like she was doing now as she forced herself to look away. They may have shared a past, but there was no future for them. This was just a date, a chance to live out a temporary dream before reality came calling. "Hey, check this out," Devon suddenly spoke up. He reached for a remote on the side of his seat and pressed a few buttons. A small screen lowered from the ceiling directly above them. "This shows us real-time info about the seabed and the fish we're seeing. You can also adjust the opacity of the windows, depending on how sunny it is. And there's an option to turn on some lights for nighttime viewing." "Wow," she exclaimed, "whoever designed this thought of everything." Kylie's eyes widened as she took in the sight. She was relieved to have something else to focus on besides the hunk of a man sitting next to her. Several names flashed on the screen: blue-striped snapper, long-nosed butterfly fish, and trumpetfish. Devon pointed out the fish to her as they flexed their bodies to propel themselves through the water. When a football-shaped fish with an extra-long snout and bright stripes passed by, the name of Hawaii's state fish, the Humuhumunukunukwapua, popped up. "That's a mouthful," she said. "I still can't say the full name." Devon chuckled. "I'm not even going to try. You know I barely passed Spanish. But you did so well in all your other classes. Much better than me." "I had to," he stated, "in order to keep my scholarship." A wistful look crossed his face. "It's so nice to not have to worry about finances anymore. Now I can do what I want and buy what I like without giving it a second thought. It's a pretty great lifestyle, isn't it?" Kylie murmured as if in agreement. She focused on the scene outside the window, trying to take her mind off the topic of money. Yet, the more she tried not to think about it, the harder it was to move past the idea that money, or the lack of it, was the main obstacle in her life. And now it was a stumbling block in her relationships, too. If only she could swim as freely as a fish. Her heart heavy, she took a deep breath and reminded herself to look on the bright side. She was fortunate to have this evening out and to be able to spend it with such a handsome and charming man as Devon. With him, there were no pretenses and no awkward silences. Theirs was a friendship born out of familiarity and pleasure. They truly enjoyed one another's company, and for that, Kylie was grateful. Soon, a marvelous sight caught her attention. A large sea turtle swam up, its two front flippers stretched out like the wings of a plane. "Dev, look. A turtle. Nice." He flashed her a grin. "I was hoping we'd see one. He's coming right up to us. Kinda makes you wonder who's checking who out." Kylie leaned in for a better look. She spotted several bright yellow fish on the turtle's back. "What are those yellow tangs doing?" she asked. "They have a symbiotic relationship with each other. The tangs keep the turtle's shell clean by eating the algae and parasites off it." He paused as a thoughtful look crossed his face. "You know how your household staff keep your mansion clean? That's what the fish are doing for the turtle." She raised a brow at Devon's answer, surprised at the analogy he used. "So, the fish are like hired help?" He shrugged nonchalantly. "That's a good way to put it." Kylie swallowed hard, her heart aching. She was wrong, Devon had changed. Now that he was at the top of the success ladder, he talked like someone with money, power, and influence. A man who no doubt had dozens of staff waiting at his beck and call. People like her, one of the hired help. No amount of pretending could erase the fact that someone like Devon would never associate with someone like her. With a heavy heart, she rose to her feet. "I'd like to go now, if you don't mind. I'm not feeling my best." Devon's brows rose in surprise. "Of course. I'll let the captain know to head back." She followed him up the stairs, feeling like a small fish in a big, wide ocean. She may have enjoyed a free ride for the evening, living like a big fish, but it was time for her Cinderella adventure to come to an end.
Chapter 7. Devon. Devon took a deep breath and positioned his hands on his golf club, gloved hand on top. He planted his feet, shoulder-width apart, on the lush green lawn and bent his knees slightly. With a fluid motion, he brought the club back and swung, pivoting his right foot in the process. He squinted against the midday sun and lifted his visor to spot where the ball had gone. It wasn't until he heard the sound of a woman clearing her throat behind him did he realize the ball still sat in the same spot. "Are you serious, Dev?" his sister Lorene remarked from where she sat in a nearby golf cart with her boyfriend, Noah. She turned to Noah. "He whiffed the ball." "Whiff?" Noah asked. "Does that mean he missed it?" "Oh yeah, big time." Lorene's red ponytail swung about as she nodded. "Dev's not the best golfer, but he usually does better than this." I have a feeling something or, more specifically, someone is distracting him. Devon rolled his eyes and exhaled. As much as he didn't want to admit his older sister was right, she was. Ever since his date with Kylie last night, he couldn't stop thinking about her. He still didn't understand why she'd ended the evening so abruptly. Had he said something to offend her? Why had she left without so much as a glance back? Noah hopped off the cart and approached Devon with both hands in the pockets of his lime green shorts. He tilted his head of sandy brown hair up to look Devon in the eyes. Is everything okay? You haven't said much all morning. It's not like you to be so quiet. I just have a lot on my mind, he murmured, wondering how much he should divulge to his friend. Noah had only started dating his sister recently and likely wasn't the best person to ask for advice on women. But he obviously must have done something right to catch Lorraine's attention. My date with Kylie didn't go the way I'd hoped, he finally admitted. And now she's not answering any of my calls or texts. Sorry to hear that, Noah replied. You don't have any clue what went wrong. Devon shook his head. He'd replayed their conversation over and over in his mind and had come up empty. If I did, I wouldn't be here right now. I'd be trying to fix things with her instead of playing my most pathetic round of golf ever. Despite the beauty of the golf course which overlooked the ocean, Devon had no heart to enjoy the view or feel passionate about the charity he was supporting. Even his outfit of a gray polo shirt and black shorts reflected his somber mood. Everything appeared dull and uninspired now that Kylie had walked out of his life again. I don't understand how you can care this much about a girl who dumped you. Lorraine strode over, exasperation darkening her green eyes. It doesn't make sense, but for some reason, you always try to see the best in people. Are you sure Kylie deserves a second chance? There was nothing Devon was more sure of. She's changed, Lorraine. Kylie's been through some hard times, but she's come out for the better because of them. Lorraine nodded. I trust your judgment. I just don't want to see you get hurt. I'm willing to take my chances, he said. She may be the best thing that's ever happened to me. I can't lose her again. All right, then stop moping around, she insisted. Put yourself out of your misery and go find her. Please. I hate seeing you like this. Go find her. Those 3 words bounced around in Devon's head, even as he stood rooted in place. Okay, I will. Great. She reached for his club. I'll take over for you here. He gave Lorraine a wide-eyed look. You may be dressed to play golf, he began, eyeing her white golf skirt, but you've never played a day in your life. Are you sure about this? She placed one hand on her hip and gave him a pointed look. I'm pretty sure that between Noah and me, one of us will be able to hit the ball. Devon scoffed. Very funny, sis. Don't worry about us. Noah smiled. You go find your girl. All right, thanks. Devon touched the rim of his visor in a brief salute goodbye and hopped onto the golf cart. With determination coursing through his veins, he stepped on the gas and pushed the vehicle to its limits. The fresh ocean air filled his lungs and also cleared his mind. Lorraine was right. Kylie was worth pursuing. He needed to let her know how he felt about her. He wasn't ready to give up yet. When he reached the edge of the golf course, he parked the cart and stepped onto the walkway leading to a modern-looking clubhouse. Before him stood several circular buildings situated around a large pond filled with red and gold koi. He made his way toward the main building, intending to thank the hosts of the charity before heading off. He also had in mind to ask them for recommendations of some upscale hotels in the area, possible places where a wealthy young woman might be staying. The social circles of the rich often overlapped, and he wouldn't be surprised if the Joneses knew of Kylie or her parents. A blast of cold air hit Devon in the face as soon as he stepped through the front doors. The air conditioning was on full blast, bringing quick relief from the humid heat. While the outside scene was a bright mix of green and blue hues, the inside of the clubhouse boasted darker, richer colors. Most of the furniture was made from reddish-brown koa wood. The place reminded him of the clubhouse he frequented back home, but with a tropical feel. A couple of blue and yellow parrots hung out on a perch stand next to the reception area. The employees behind the desk wore Hawaiian print shirts and leis made from purple and white plumerias. Devon took off his visor and golf glove and stuck them in his back pocket, then ran a hand through his short crew cut. He was about to walk over to the reception desk when he felt a tug on his leg. He looked down, right into a pair of light blue eyes and a toothy grin. A young child about 3 or 4 had made herself at home on his black golf shoes. She hugged his calf so tightly, he imagined he could take a few steps without her falling off. Perhaps that's what she was looking for, a free ride. But who did she belong to? Just as he wondered how he should pry her sticky hands off his leg, a woman called out in the distance. "Molly. Where are you?" The hair on the back of Devon's neck stood on end. He'd recognize that voice anywhere. Glancing up, his gaze landed on the woman who had occupied his dreams all night. Her dark brown hair lay in a braid that was draped across one shoulder. She wore a casual outfit of a pink athletic top and black yoga pants with sneakers. After a moment of shock, he picked up his jaw and exclaimed, "Kylie. What are you doing here?" Her complexion paled as embarrassment and fear flickered across her face. With a nervous smile, she rushed over to coax the little girl away. She avoided his eyes as she apologized, "Please excuse us, Mr. Brooks." She then turned to Molly and pled with her, "Let's go. We need to find your sister." The child shook her head resolutely and clung to Devon's leg even tighter. It wasn't until a fashionably dressed woman with stern eyes approached them that the little girl loosened her hold. With a look of displeasure, Mrs. Jones shooed the girl away. She then greeted Devon with a sugary smile. "I see you've met my youngest. I do apologize for her behavior. She must have had one too many cookies today." "It's no problem at all," Devon reassured her. "I remember being that energetic once." "Yes, well, it seems the nanny is a little off her game today, letting her run amok like this," she murmured out of the corner of her mouth as Kylie and her daughter walked away. "You'd think with the amount of money I pay her, she'd do a better job. It's so hard to find good help these days, don't you agree?" Devon squeezed out a polite smile as Mrs. Jones lamented further about her staff. He swallowed his shock as the pieces of the puzzle began falling into place. Kylie worked for the Joneses. Moreover, she had lied about her situation. But what bothered him the most was the fact that she hadn't trusted him enough to tell him. Now more than ever, he was determined to find her and get the truth.
Chapter 8. Kylie. Humiliation washed over Kylie like waves crashing onto the shore, knocking her over and pulling her down. She could hardly breathe, her chest was so tight. Bumping into Devon had been a nightmare come true. Except the shock and confusion on his face had been all too real. Her secret was exposed, and Devon now knew how little she was worth. Kylie wished she had a minute to compose herself, but Mrs. Jones soon entered the conference room where she and the children were. One look at her employer made her skin grow cold. Mrs. Jones gestured with one curved index finger for Kylie to approach, her expression as grim as ever. "Miss Martin, I continue to find your work ethic less than acceptable. My children require discipline and structure, both of which you are not able to provide. Instead, you allow them to run around like wild animals. I cannot have you exerting your bad influence on them. I regret to inform you that we shall no longer be needing your services." "No, please." Kylie's eyes burned hot with tears. "I need this job. I can't pay for my mom's rent without it." Without a care, the older woman continued her spiel, "Please pack up your belongings immediately. You will need to find your own way home." Mrs. Jones might as well have punched her in the stomach. Kylie doubled over, clutching at her chest in desperation. "I have no money to fly back to California. At least let me finish up this assignment, Mrs. Jones. Please. I can't in good conscience pay you for a job you are not fulfilling." With a flick of her wrist, she checked her diamond and gold watch. "I'm afraid you're on your own." With a firm nod, she rounded up her daughters, who had finally calmed down enough to stand in one place, and left the room. A sob escaped Kylie's lips, but she quickly covered her mouth. She would not give in to her tears. Not now. She'd done enough crying last night after her and Devon's date. Right now, she had to think and act quickly. She swiped at her eyes and took a deep breath. First things first, she had to find a way from the clubhouse to the resort where she was staying. She needed to pack up her bags before Mrs. Jones threw out the few possessions she owned. Maybe with Tabby's help, she could scrounge up some money to buy a plane ticket. Short of swimming home, she'd find a way back. She had no choice but to try. With this plan in mind, she picked up her feet and rushed out into the hall, toward the lobby. She moved with purpose and desperation, her jaw clenched tight, not realizing a man stood between her and the front doors of the clubhouse. Before she could stop herself, she walked smack into his firm chest. She lost her footing and would have fallen over were it not for the strong, muscular arms that caught her and pulled her close. A familiar musky scent filled her senses, making her head spin. Devon. She glanced up and saw his hazel eyes trained on her, trying to look into her soul. She should have known she wouldn't be able to keep a secret from him for long. He'd always had a way of seeing past the smile she faked. For a second, her resolve crumbled. She considered what it would be like to lean on him again, to trust him. But shame cut through her thoughts, forcing her to step back and out of his embrace. Devon had fallen for her when she was wealthy and popular. He'd never want her like this. "I'm sorry," she apologized, "I didn't see you." "Kylie, what's going on?" "Talk to me." Devon reached for her hand and held it tight. "Why are you working as a nanny?" The concern in his voice tipped her over the edge. Her words poured out faster than spilled milk. "My dad gambled all our money away. This job is my only means of keeping a roof over my mom's head and food on the table. Or it was," she sighed deeply, "until I got fired." "Fired?" he exclaimed. "Katrina Jones fired you? Was it over the incident with her daughter?" "I told her I didn't mind what happened. Let me go talk Dev." She cut him off. "It's okay." Several heads had turned their way when Devon began raising his voice. "It's probably better this way. I'm not cut out to be a nanny. I'd be better off doing office work or anything that doesn't require interacting with people half my size. The only way I could ever get them to listen was by bribing them with sweets. But all the sugar had them bouncing off the walls, which is what happened earlier." Kylie groaned and shook her head. Why was she blabbing like a fool to him? He couldn't care less about her troubles. "Sorry, I didn't mean to hold you up," she stated. "I'm sure you have somewhere important you have to be." Devon grew quiet, his expression sober. Small creases formed between his brows as he pinned her in place with an intense look. His eyes never left her face as he spoke in a husky voice. "There's nowhere I'd rather be than here. In case you didn't notice, I'm the one holding on to your hand." He paused and released a heavy breath. "I know we were just kids when we were together, but when I fell for you, I fell hard. Seeing you after all these years, it's like nothing's changed. I still feel the same way about you that I did then." Kylie's breath hitched. Devon was gently caressing her hand with the pad of his thumb, spreading warmth along her skin and sending tingles up her arm. Her body seemed to believe his words, but her mind warred within her. Didn't he realize who she'd become? She had no choice but to voice her concerns out loud. "Look at me. I'm one paycheck away from being homeless. I have nothing to my name. Not only that, I treated you horribly in the past. I don't deserve a second of your time." She tried to pull her hand from his, but her attempt only served to make him hold on tighter. "You deserve better, Devon." He brought her hand to his mouth and placed a soft kiss on her palm. "I am looking at you, and all I see is the girl I had a crush on who grew up to be the woman I've been longing for. I see you, Kylie, and I like who I see. You're strong and sacrificial. You're doing your all to take care of your mom. You're brave and persistent, taking on these responsibilities and making the best of your circumstances. You're so beautiful, inside and out. He ran a finger along the side of her jaw until he reached her chin. Tilting her head up, he looked straight into her eyes. I hardly think I deserve you. But I'm going to do my best to measure up. If you'll allow me to. Kylie swallowed hard. She heard the earnestness in his last words, along with a hint of hesitation. If only Devon could feel the pounding of her heart, he would know he needn't worry. He more than met her expectations. The thought of Devon accepting her for who she was, despite her current state, meant more to her than she could express. Her emotions overwhelmed her to the point of tears. There was no way she could get a word out, so she did the next best thing. She let her lips do the talking. Standing on her tiptoes, Kylie stretched up to bring herself closer to Devon. She was sure he could read her mind, or maybe he'd been thinking the same thing, because he leaned down at the same time. In the next instant, their mouths met, melding together in a fantastic explosion of heat and desire. She let out a soft gasp. The familiar feel and taste of him filled her heart's longing. Along with the old sensations, she made some new discoveries. Devon had grown into a man with more confidence and, if possible, an even more tender heart. His lips were gentle yet insistent. He kissed her with abandon, fully giving of himself with every touch and caress. His large hands held her in place, flush against his body, helping her weak knees to stay upright. Kylie leaned into him, feeling her heart beat in time with his. The intensity of the moment made her head spin. She had a feeling he wasn't letting go of her so easily this time. To be honest, she didn't want him to. She was content to stay in his arms like this forever. For the first time in a long time, she was comfortable in her own skin. And she had the most wonderful man to thank for that.
Chapter 9. Devon. Devon would have been content to hold Kylie and kiss her for as long as she'd let him, but he was keenly aware of eyes watching them. A loud whistle from the front entryway, along with a woman's gasp, broke through their intimate moment. He reluctantly pulled back from the kiss and lifted his head. Sure enough, Lorene and Noah were cheering and clapping their support. Wow, you don't waste any time. Lorene stepped forward with a smirk on her pink lips. I see you managed to convince Kylie to give you a second chance. Hey, guys, Kylie greeted them with a smile. Actually, he's the one who gave me another chance. She squeezed Devon's hand and looked up with tenderness in her eyes. Thank you for that. No, he insisted with a shake of his head, thank you. I've never been happier. Whatever the case may be, Lorene stated, Noah and I are both thankful we don't play golf. How anyone can get a ball into such a small hole is beyond me. I say it's time to wrap things up here and get moving. There's so much more of the island that we haven't explored. You mean so many shops you haven't gone to yet? Noah joked with adoring eyes. He turned to Devon and Kylie and asked, how about it, guys? Gabe and Sierra just called to let us know they're coming for the weekend. They'll be landing in an hour. Do you want to join us, or do you need some alone time together? Devon chuckled as Noah wiggled his eyebrows. He wrapped an arm around Kylie's shoulders and drew her to his side. What would you like to do? She leaned into him and sighed. I'd love to hang out, but I have to deal with real life. I need to find a way to fly back home, then look for a new job. You go ahead, Dev. You should enjoy the rest of your vacation. He frowned. There's no way I could enjoy any of it without you. Leave your worries to me. I happen to know someone who owns a growing company. I'm sure he'll be able to find a job suitable for you. Dev, that's nepotism. Kylie shook her head adamantly. You can't make up a position just for me. Don't think he won't try, Lorene piped up. Hey, Kylie, I'm not sure what your situation is like, but maybe we can help each other out. I'm in need of someone with an artistic eye who can help design a logo and other promotional material for my new nonprofit organization. I remember you did an amazing job with our school yearbook. What do you say? Are you serious? Kylie's eyes widened. I don't want you to offer me the job out of pity. Lorene scoffed. Pity? No way. The only thing I'd pity you for is having to deal with my little brother. He may look like a grown man, but he's a big kid at heart. Anyways, it makes me happy to see him happy. I have you to thank for that. Kylie laughed as she gave Devon's chest a playful pat. I do love his heart. I think I'll take my chances with him. I'd love to take your job offer, too, she added with a bright smile. Great. We'll talk details when we go shopping later. Lorene grabbed Noah's hand and pulled him toward the door. As they stepped outside, she called over her shoulder, We'll meet you guys back at the villa. Devon waved to Lorene and Noah, then gave Kylie a kiss on the top of her head. Look at that, your problems are solved. Kylie smiled gratefully. One of them, at least. I still don't know how I'm going to pay for my plane ticket home. Devon stared at her, not sure if she was serious or not. Didn't she know he had the means to provide for that and more? Kylie, I can fly you home on my private jet. We could even take the yacht we went out on last night, although it would take a couple of days. Whatever your heart desires, I can make it happen. She wrinkled her pert nose. I can't ask you to fix all my problems, Dev. They're mine to deal with. She hesitated and turned to face him. I don't want you to think I only want to be with you for your money. That's not the case at all. You know that, right? He lifted a finger to caress her cheek. I know. You took a chance on me before I had any riches. But now that I do, I want to provide for you. All the money in the world means nothing if I don't have someone to share it with. I want to share mine and my life with you. Oh, Dev. Kylie's bottom lip trembled with emotion. She gave him the most tender smile, her eyes welling with tears. I don't know what I did to deserve you. Your heart is worth more than gold. I promise to be careful with it this time. That's all Devon needed to hear. I know you will. His bank account might have been full, but more importantly, his life was now complete as well. He had what money could never buy, the heart of the woman he loved. He truly was a wealthy and happy billionaire. Thank you so much for listening to this audiobook. To learn more about Liwen Ho's other books, please check out her website at liwenho.com. And be sure to subscribe to this channel so you will be notified when a new audiobook releases.